For ages, the galaxy had been ruled by one name whispered in fear: the Vrek Dominion. To most species, they were not just conquerors. They were the definition of power. Massive warships darkened the skies of worlds long before surrender messages could even be sent. Entire civilizations disappeared in silence, leaving behind only wrecked cities and forgotten memories. No one questioned their rule. No one dared to. The Vrek called themselves the apex of life, the top of all evolution. They had claws that could cut through armor, minds trained for battle since birth, and technology that looked like magic to anyone else. Every new species they found became another addition to their empire, or another warning to the rest of the galaxy. They believed it was their destiny to rule forever. To them, war was sport. Their fleets traveled across the stars, claiming planet after planet without pause. When they weren't fighting, they trained for the next fight. Every generation grew up learning the same story. The strong survive and the weak exist only to serve. That was the order of the universe. That was the Vrek way, and for a very long time it seemed they were right. No one could stop them. Yet in the far edges of the galaxy, hidden behind a quiet spiral arm, there existed a small blue world circling an ordinary yellow star. To the Vrek, it was insignificant, barely worth scanning. But if they had looked closer, they would have seen something strange, a species unlike any other. They called themselves humans. At first glance, humans looked fragile. They had soft skin, small bodies, and short lives. They didn't have natural armor, nor claws, nor telepathic strength like other species the Vrek had conquered. Their world was not covered with cities of shining metal or towers touching the clouds. They were still new to space travel, still learning how to walk among the stars. By the Dominion standards, humanity was nothing, just another primitive civilization waiting to be absorbed. But beneath that quiet surface, something different was growing. Humans were restless. They were curious about everything around them. They asked questions no one else dared to ask, and when they didn't find answers, they built tools to search for them. They fought not because they loved war, but because they wanted to protect what they loved. They laughed even when the odds were against them, and they dreamed of touching places beyond their reach. It wasn't strength in their bodies that made them unique. It was strength in their hearts. On distant observation stations, the Vrek scouts sometimes picked up strange radio waves from that blue planet. They were not distress calls or military signals, but something completely unfamiliar. Songs, laughter, conversations about life and love. The predators couldn't understand it. What kind of species wastes power on such useless sounds? They dismissed it as foolish noise, but the noise kept coming. Decades passed, and those signals grew stronger. Humanity had entered the space age. They built satellites, stations, and small exploration ships that ventured beyond their home world. They were slow, clumsy, and uncoordinated, but persistent. When one mission failed, another followed. When one ship crashed, they built two more. No other species had ever advanced so quickly in such a short time. It was as if their determination burned brighter than their own sun. Across the galaxy, the Vrek continued their campaigns, conquering everything that moved. They didn't fear anything anymore. Planets surrendered the moment they appeared. Armies ran before the first battle began. To them, the galaxy was already theirs. So when one of their scout vessels picked up human signals again, it seemed like a good chance for amusement, a new species to educate about dominance. The scouts sent back data, primitive technology, small defense fleets, untested weapons. The Vrek leaders laughed. Another soft world, they said. They'll kneel before they even understand what's happening. And so they made a plan. A small fleet would travel to that tiny system just to make an example. They expected fear, panic, surrender. They were certain it would be another easy victory. While the Vrek prepared their fleet, Earth carried on unaware. People were busy with their everyday lives. Children going to school, workers building new satellites, scientists dreaming about life beyond their solar system. No one imagined that far away someone was already watching them. Humanity had always looked up at the stars with wonder, not realizing that sometimes the stars looked back with hunger. When the Vrek warships finally approached the edge of the solar system, their arrival went unnoticed at first. They were experts at stealth. They'd studied thousands of planets. But something unexpected happened. One of their ships malfunctioned. Its signal was detected by a deep space listening array near Pluto. The message was faint, but it was there. Proof that something alien was out there. At first, scientists thought it was interference or a natural phenomenon, but when the same signal repeated, they knew it wasn't random. The discovery spread across the world. People were excited, not scared. News channels called it first contact. Governments began preparing messages of peace. Humanity, in its innocence, believed that whoever was out there would want to talk. They didn't know who they were inviting. The Vrike ships entered the system slowly, scanning every planet. They saw Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all lifeless worlds compared to Earth. And then they found it, the small blue planet covered in water, filled with life. The leader of the Vrike fleet laughed when he saw it on the screen. "So much life," he said. "It will make a fine addition to the Dominion." But something about Earth confused them. They expected chaos and disorganization, yet they saw unity in ways that were rare for younger species. They saw humans cooperating, inventing, connecting. It made no sense. "Why do they work together so easily?" one of them asked. The commander only replied, "It doesn't matter. Soon they will serve." From Earth's point of view, the strange signals from deep space became stronger. Space agencies detected large moving objects heading toward the inner system. Still, most people didn't believe it was a threat. After all, humanity had never known anything beyond itself. They thought any intelligent species would come in peace. They sent greetings, invitations, even music, messages of hope traveling toward the unknown. When the messages reached the Vrike, the predators didn't understand them. The language was strange, full of emotion and warmth. There was no fear in it. That was the moment that truly puzzled them. Every other species they'd encountered had screamed or begged when their ships appeared. But humans were calm. They welcomed the unknown. That small detail, the lack of fear, was the first crack in the Vrike's confidence, though they didn't realize it yet. Far from Earth, the humans watching the radar screens noticed something alarming. The unknown objects were huge, moving with deliberate speed and perfect coordination. They were not meteors. They were not comets. They were ships. Realization spread quickly. This was no friendly visit. For the first time in history, all of Earth's nations stopped competing and started working together. The world's strongest minds gathered to understand what was coming. They had no idea what these beings wanted, but they knew one thing. If they were powerful enough to travel between stars, they could destroy everything in moments. Humanity had faced wars, disasters, and extinction before, but nothing like this. And yet, even in the face of something so terrifying, humanity didn't surrender. They didn't give up or hide. They started preparing. Communication satellites were turned into warning systems. Defense ships were reactivated. Every resource was redirected toward one goal: survival. Not domination, not conquest, just survival. While humans were preparing for possible contact, the Vrike fleet reached the outer edge of Jupiter. They expected to see panic signals, but instead they saw more transmissions filled with greetings, curiosity, and hope. "They don't even understand what's about to happen," one Vrike officer said with amusement. The commander smirked. Let them smile a little longer. From that moment, two completely different minds, one built on fear and domination, the other on curiosity and resilience, moved toward their first meeting. The Vrike believed it would be a moment of victory. The humans believed it would be a moment of friendship. The universe, silent and watching, knew it would be something else entirely. For the Vrike, this was just another conquest. For humanity, it was the beginning of a story that would echo across galaxies, a story that would change everything. The predators thought they ruled forever, but they had never met anyone quite like the people of Earth. The small blue planet didn't look dangerous. It didn't look powerful, but inside its people lived something the galaxy had forgotten. A fire that refused to die, a courage that grew stronger with every threat, and a stubborn hope that would one day make even the fiercest predators tremble. And so, without realizing it, the unstoppable Vrike Dominion had just taken their first step toward the one enemy they could never truly defeat: humanity. For a long time, humans had looked at the stars and wondered if someone out there was watching them. They built telescopes, sent out radio waves, and launched small robotic explorers into the dark. When they finally received strange signals from deep space, people didn't panic. Instead, the world was filled with excitement. Scientists, students, and dreamers all believed they were about to meet intelligent life for the first time. Humanity wanted to believe that whoever was out there would be peaceful and wise. Across the globe, news channels ran headlines about first contact, documentaries, talk shows and interviews filled the screens. Some people said this was the start of a new age. Others thought it was just a mistake, some kind of interference. But in every home, one question echoed quietly. Who are they? The signals were simple at first, just patterns of repeating tones. Then came something more structured, like a deliberate message. Humanity worked together to decode it, but it didn't match any known language. What no one realized was that these were not messages meant for peace. They were scans, the kind used by advanced civilizations to study a planet before deciding what to do with it. Far from Earth, hidden behind the dark side of Jupiter, enormous ships floated silently. They didn't shine like human spacecraft or make any radio noise. They were alive in a sense. Machines fused with living material, created by the Vrike Dominion. The Vrike didn't come for friendship or curiosity. To them, this was just another part of their endless mission, to conquer, to rule, and to remind the galaxy who was in charge. Their first impression of humans was confusion. They didn't understand why a species so new to space would send friendly signals instead of defensive ones. The Vrike commander ordered his team to analyze human behavior through intercepted broadcasts. For days, they listened to radio shows, news, and even music. The more they listened, the less sense it made. There was laughter, joy, sadness, arguments, and art. Emotions layered in ways they couldn't classify. One of the younger Vrike officers asked, "Commander, what are these sounds they call songs?" The commander replied coldly, "Noise, a sign of weakness. They use sound to comfort themselves. They fear silence, but the Vrike were wrong. That noise and the music, the words, the stories, was something much deeper. It was the voice of humanity, a reflection of its soul. It was something no war machine could ever understand." Back on Earth, scientists noticed something strange. The signals they were studying were moving, changing direction as if something was guiding them. A few experts warned that it could be an approaching object, maybe a ship. Governments quietly started taking precautions, but they didn't want the public to panic. Satellites were repositioned, observatories were told to keep watch, and secret briefings began around the world. Still, life went on as normal for most people. Children went to school, cities buzzed with energy, and the world kept spinning under its blue sky. Humanity didn't know it yet, but their ordinary days were about to end. The Vrike fleet soon entered the inner solar system. Their ships were invisible to human radar at first, wrapped in cloaking fields that bent light and sound. But when one of their smaller craft malfunctioned near Mars, it left a trail, a strange disturbance that human instruments caught immediately. It was enough to prove that something massive and unknown was coming closer. When the news reached the control rooms on Earth, silence filled the air. The data couldn't be denied anymore. There was something out there, and it was heading straight toward them. Within hours, the first blurry images appeared, objects larger than any human spacecraft moving in formation. Governments across the planet went into emergency meetings. For the first time in history, all major nations connected under one command network. It didn't matter what language people spoke or what flag they stood under. They were all human now, and they all faced the same unknown. But instead of reacting with fear, humanity did something that surprised even themselves. They prepared with calm determination. Engineers worked nonstop trying to boost old defense satellites. Astronomers coordinated signals to reach the approaching objects. The goal wasn't to attack. It was to communicate. The message was simple. We come in peace. We wish to talk. When the Vrike received that message, they laughed. In their culture, peace was a word for the defeated. They couldn't understand how a species facing a fleet of warships could still sound so confident, so unafraid. To them, it was arrogance. To humans, it was hope. The Vrike commander decided to test humanity's reaction. One of their smaller ships moved toward the moon, activating a display of light. A warning. A show of strength. On Earth, people saw strange glowing patterns appear in the night sky. Millions gathered outside, pointing and recording. It was beautiful, mysterious, and terrifying all at once. The Vrike waited for panic. But it never came. Instead, they saw humans celebrating, cheering, waving flags, and broadcasting messages of welcome. People called it the Night of Light. For a few hours, the whole world stood together, united under the same sky, staring at the same glowing patterns. In their ships, the Vrak grew quiet. No species had ever reacted like this. Usually the first sign of their presence caused screams, evacuations, and chaos. But the humans? They smiled. That was when the Vrak commander gave his next order. Enough play. Let them see who we are. The fleet deactivated its cloaking fields. For the first time, the human race saw the true form of an alien ship. It wasn't smooth and silver like in movies. It was dark and strange like living metal, its surface pulsing faintly as if it breathed. The sight of it filled the sky above Earth's atmosphere, casting long shadows across oceans and continents. People stood in awe. Some cried. Some prayed. But still, there was no attack, no panic. Humanity didn't know what to do except watch. The United Earth Network sent out another message, an open broadcast of peace and curiosity. They even sent a recording of a heartbeat, a symbol of life. It was the most human thing they could think of. The Vrak listened, but they couldn't understand why anyone would send such a thing. To them, it was foolishness. Yet deep inside, a few of them felt something unusual, something close to respect. They had crushed countless civilizations before, but none had ever stood so calmly in their presence. Then, without warning, a sudden wave of energy spread across space. One of the human satellites exploded, not from a weapon but from the pressure of the Vrak's signal scan. It was enough to send shockwaves through human communication systems. For a few minutes, Earth went dark. Every screen went blank. Every signal vanished. When the systems came back online, the world was silent. People realized the truth. Whoever these beings were, they weren't here for peace. The moment marked a turning point. The human leaders decided to stop sending friendly messages. Instead, they began preparing for the worst. The global defense network was activated. Small human ships were sent to form a barrier near the moon, not to fight but to observe. Every pilot knew they wouldn't stand a chance if it came to battle, but they still went. Because that's what humans did. They faced the unknown no matter how impossible it looked. Up in orbit, as those small ships moved into position, they caught their first clear visual of the Vrak fleet. There were dozens of them, massive, silent, and perfectly aligned. No heat signatures, no visible weapons, just quiet cold power. The human crews felt a mix of fear and wonder. "They're beautiful," one of them whispered. And they were, in a terrifying, majestic way. The Vrak observed the human defenses and almost felt pity. They could have ended it right there, but the commander wanted to understand this species more. "Why are they not afraid?" he kept asking. "Why do they keep standing?" For days, the two sides remained locked in silence. Human scientists tried to understand the alien ships. The Vrak scanned Earth endlessly, trying to find weakness. Each side waited for the other to make the first move. Then something unexpected happened. A storm of solar radiation from the sun hit the Vrak fleet directly. It was harmless to humans, but it disrupted their cloaking systems again, exposing them to every telescope on Earth. Millions saw them clearly for the first time. And what they saw didn't bring terror anymore. It brought courage. Because when people truly saw the Vrak ships, they realized they were not gods. They were just machines. Just another kind of life. Powerful, yes, but not unstoppable. That night, humanity changed. Fear turned into determination. The world didn't see invincible predators anymore. They saw a challenge. Scientists worked faster. Engineers built stronger shields. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't looking up at the stars to dream. They were looking up to defend. And somewhere deep in space, among the stars near Jupiter, the Vrak commander watched those same humans. Small, fragile, yet somehow unbroken. And he felt something unfamiliar rise inside him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't amusement. It was curiosity and a quiet sense of unease. The humans were not reacting like prey. They were something else, something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. The first encounter was not a war, and it was not peace. It was a moment of truth, a silent stare between predator and survivor. And though no words were spoken, the message was clear. The Vrak had found their next target, and humanity had found its greatest test. After the first encounter, Earth was no longer the same. The skies looked the same. The cities still glowed at night, but deep inside every human heart, something had changed forever. People now knew they weren't alone. They also knew that whoever was out there wasn't here for peace. At first, fear spread quietly. People wondered if it was the end. Families watched the night sky, trying to spot any strange lights. Some believed the visitors would return with kindness. Others were sure they'd come with destruction. But after the shock faded, humanity did something no one expected. They united. For the first time in history, borders didn't matter. Scientists, engineers, and leaders from every country started working together. It wasn't about competition anymore. It was about survival. Humanity had faced many problems before: wars, disasters, pandemics. But nothing had ever forced them to think as one species until now. In the beginning, humanity had no real weapons that could match the alien ships. Their technology was too far ahead. The Vrek fleet could bend light, travel faster than anything humans had built, and read data from entire planets. But what they didn't have was something Earth had always relied on: creativity, courage, and stubborn hope. Every university lab, every small factory, every hidden research base turned its focus toward understanding the enemy. Scientists analyzed every bit of data from the first encounter. The signals, the energy readings, the strange radiation left behind by the ships. All of it became clues. Humans didn't give up because that's not who they were. A new organization was formed, one that didn't belong to any nation. It was made up of volunteers, thinkers, and dreamers. Their mission was simple: learn everything possible about the Vrek and find a way to defend Earth. At first, progress was slow. The alien technology was too advanced. Even their smallest drones looked impossible to study. But then, something happened that changed everything. A fragment of alien material, a piece of debris from the damaged Vrek scout ship near Mars, was recovered by a human probe. It was brought back carefully, studied under heavy protection. The fragment was strange, smooth, almost alive, constantly shifting colors under light. It reacted to touch, to sound, even to thoughts. Scientists couldn't believe it. It was more than metal. It was a kind of living machine. Days turned into weeks, and the research team made a discovery that shocked them all. Inside the fragment were patterns, not random, but organized like DNA. It wasn't just technology. It was biology mixed with machinery. That's when they realized something extraordinary. If this living metal could respond to human signals, maybe it could be controlled. That single thought became the spark humanity needed. Experiments began everywhere. Some failed miserably. Others showed tiny signs of success. One day, a small energy pulse from the fragment responded to a human-built signal. It wasn't much, but it meant something huge. Humans could interact with alien tech. They could learn from it. The discovery spread like wildfire. Suddenly, there was hope again. Humanity didn't need to match the Vrek's technology overnight. They just needed to understand enough to fight smart, not strong. Meanwhile, far beyond Earth, the Vrek Dominion was watching. Reports came in about humans experimenting with the debris, trying to understand it. The Vrek commanders were amused at first. To them, it was like watching children play with fire. "Let them try," one said. "They will only burn themselves." But as time went on, they started noticing something unusual. The humans weren't burning themselves. They were adapting. Fast, much faster than any species before them. Within months, human ships that once struggled to reach Mars were now testing new propulsion systems inspired by alien tech. They weren't perfect, but they worked. Satellites were upgraded, communication systems strengthened, and energy shields, once thought impossible, began to take shape in prototypes. The Vrek had no idea that the very technology they left behind was now becoming humanity's greatest weapon. Still, not everything was easy. The stress of constant fear took its toll. Some people doubted the global effort. Others believed it was hopeless to stand against something so powerful. But the majority refused to give in. People who had never met before, scientists from one continent, engineers from another, worked late into the night, driven by a single belief: if we don't protect Earth, no one will. Every small success became a story of inspiration. When one team discovered how to neutralize a tiny part of alien energy, they shared it freely with everyone else. No secrets, no competition. It was humanity at its best, united by survival, powered by courage. Months passed. The skies stayed quiet. The Vrek didn't return, not yet. But their presence was always there, a shadow in everyone's mind. The silence felt like a countdown. Everyone knew that one day the visitors would come again, and next time they wouldn't be just observing. That thought pushed humans to work even harder. Young minds that once dreamed of space exploration now dreamed of defense. Artists painted murals of Earth's blue oceans and green lands as reminders of what they were fighting for. Farmers sent supplies to research bases for free. Even children drew pictures of rockets with messages that said, "For our planet." Hope had turned into determination. In hidden workshops, small test ships were built using a mix of human and alien technology. They looked strange, part metal, part glowing material that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The engineers called them hybrids. These ships weren't powerful enough for full battle, but they were proof that humans could learn from what once belonged to their enemies. When the first hybrid ship lifted off from Earth, the world held its breath. It wasn't just a launch, it was a message to the universe. Humanity was no longer just reacting. They were evolving. Up in orbit, that small hybrid craft glowed softly as it floated against the black of space. Inside, everything was quiet except for the sound of the engines humming. It wasn't perfect. The systems flickered. The navigation failed now and then. But it worked. It moved faster than any human-made ship before it. The sight of it filled people on Earth with pride. They cheered, cried, and hugged each other. It wasn't victory, but it was progress. And progress was enough to keep hope alive. The Vrek received the transmission of the test flight soon after. Their leaders watched the video silently. The commander frowned. "They're adapting," he said. "Too quickly." Others argued it didn't matter, that no primitive race could ever truly challenge the Dominion. But deep down, doubt began to stir. The Vrek had built their empire on the idea that no one could evolve faster than them. But now they were seeing something different. A species that had gone from first contact to alien-level experimentation in less than a single cycle. That speed frightened them more than any weapon ever could. Back on Earth, as months turned into a year, humanity became stronger. Not just technologically, but emotionally. People learned to live with the unknown above their heads. They stopped waiting for help and started creating their own answers. They realized that fear could either paralyze or motivate, and they chose the latter. The world wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, mistakes, and moments of doubt, but every time a problem arose, someone somewhere found a solution. That was the real power of humans. They didn't need to be the strongest. They just needed to refuse to quit. Then, one quiet morning, space monitors picked up new signals. Stronger, clearer, and moving fast. The Vrek were coming back, but this time things were different. Humanity wasn't helpless anymore. The defense network was ready. Hybrid ships were in orbit. Pilots had trained for months. The same people who once stared at the stars with fear now looked at them with defiance. There was no panic this time. Only calm determination. Every human knew what was at stake. Their homes, their families, their world. But they also knew they weren't facing the unknown as the same species that had once sent out messages of peace. They had learned, adapted, and changed. The spark of defiance had turned into a flame. And somewhere in the endless night of space, the Vrek commander stared at the planet below, blue, bright, and alive, and finally understood what made these humans dangerous. It wasn't their weapons. It wasn't their numbers, it was their spirit. A species that refused to surrender, a world that refused to bow, a people who turned fear into strength. The Vrek had come expecting prey. What they found instead was resistance, and that was just the beginning. The day the Vrek fleet returned, the sky over Earth was clear. The oceans were calm, cities were busy, and people were going about their lives as if nothing had changed. But above that blue sky, beyond the thin layer of clouds, history was waiting to unfold again. This time, the Vrek didn't come quietly. They didn't hide behind cloaking systems or send out false signals. They wanted to be seen. Across every telescope, radar, and satellite, enormous shapes appeared, hundreds of them moving like shadows across space. Their ships blocked the sunlight for seconds at a time, casting dark streaks over the planet. But the reaction from Earth was nothing like before. There was no screaming, no chaos. People didn't run. They watched. They had spent months preparing for this. The world was ready in a way it had never been before. The fear that once gripped humanity had turned into something new. Calm defiance. From underground command centers to space stations orbiting above, every part of the defense network came alive. Operators checked their systems. Engineers made last-minute adjustments, and pilots waited for orders inside their new hybrid ships. For many of them, it didn't matter if they won or lost. What mattered was that they stood their ground. Down on Earth, families gathered outside their homes to look at the sky. Some prayed. Some simply held hands. They knew this moment would decide their future. Maybe even the future of every species like them. When the first wave of Vrak ships entered near orbit, the world went silent. The alien ships looked like moving mountains, dark and smooth, covered in strange light patterns. Their presence filled the atmosphere with a quiet hum that could be felt more than heard. Then, for the first time, a clear signal reached every human receiver. It wasn't words. It was a voice made of sounds translated through machines. It spoke slowly with pride and certainty. It wasn't a greeting. It was a declaration. They called themselves the rulers of the stars and demanded Earth's surrender. For a moment, there was only silence on Earth. Everyone waited for their leaders to respond. The answer came not from fear, but from unity. A single message was sent back to space, broadcast on every open frequency. It said, "This planet is not yours. We do not surrender." It was simple, short, and human. In that moment, the Vrak understood that this would not be like any conquest they had ever done. The humans were not begging for mercy. They were ready to fight. The fleet's commander hesitated. In all of his years, he had seen countless worlds give up without a sound. But these humans, so young and fragile, stood against him with confidence. It was almost unthinkable. "They are not afraid," he muttered. Interesting. He ordered his ships to test Earth's defenses. Small bursts of energy were sent toward the upper atmosphere, harmless probes meant to measure human technology. But the moment they appeared, something surprising happened. From Earth's orbit, dozens of hybrid defense ships lit up, activating energy shields made partly from Vrak material. The alien pulses hit those shields and scattered into harmless sparks of light. The humans had learned to block them. In every command room, cheers broke out. It wasn't victory yet, but it was proof that humanity could protect itself. The spark of defiance from months ago had now turned into real strength. The Vrak fleet adjusted. They weren't going to underestimate this planet anymore, but their pride made them slow to react. They still saw humans as lesser beings, clever perhaps, but still primitive. That arrogance would soon cost them dearly. Human ships began to move, not in perfect lines or formation like the Vrak, but with a kind of unpredictable rhythm. They moved like dancers, fast and flexible, changing directions constantly. The alien scanners struggled to keep up. For the first time, humans used tactics that made no sense to machines. Random patterns, unexpected maneuvers, and fake transmissions to confuse the enemy. What the Vrak called chaos, humans called creativity. Even before the first true clash, the Vrak realized something dangerous. Humans didn't think like them. And that made them impossible to predict. As the day went on, small skirmishes began across the empty parts of space near the moon. Human hybrid ships, smaller but faster, darted between asteroids and debris fields. The Vrak tried to corner them with precision, but the humans kept slipping away, vanishing behind rocks or diving into orbits that made no logical sense. Every time the Vrak tried to trap them, they ended up being misled by fake signals. Humans were using basic tricks, decoy beacons, reflective drones, and clever timing, but in ways that no computer could fully counter. Hours passed, and the Vrak commander grew frustrated. "They are not following any pattern," he growled. "They fight like animals," but one of his officers replied, "No, they fight like survivors." That small observation marked the beginning of doubt among the Vrak. On Earth, people watched the live feeds coming from space. Whenever a human ship escaped danger or outsmarted a larger vessel, people cheered across continents. The world was united not by victory, but by the courage of those few who stood in the darkness above them. The Vrak tried one more strategy. They sent a massive signal to confuse human communications, hoping to shut down their coordination. But humans adapted quickly. They switched to old-fashioned analog methods, something the Vrak had never considered. It was simple, primitive but effective. That was when the aliens finally understood. Humans didn't always rely on perfection. They relied on improvisation. As the sun set on Earth, the battle in space reached its most intense point. Neither side had truly won or lost, but something incredible had happened. The Vrike had been stopped. For the first time in their long history, their advance had met resistance they couldn't easily crush. That night, as the human pilots returned to orbiting stations, they looked down at their glowing planet below and felt pride like never before. They hadn't saved the world yet, but they had proved it was possible. On the surface, people filled the streets holding candles and lights, looking up at the stars. The news called it the Night of Defiance. Everyone knew the war wasn't over. But they also knew this. Humanity was no longer helpless up in space. The Vrike commander stood in silence, watching Earth rotate below him. His fleet was intact, but his pride was not. For centuries, his species had crushed entire civilizations without effort. But these humans had changed everything. They didn't bow, they didn't break, and they didn't act like prey. They are dangerous, he said quietly, not because of their weapons, but because of their minds. He ordered his fleet to retreat, not out of fear but out of caution. The humans had shown something he had never seen before, unpredictability mixed with courage. He knew that if they stayed longer, they might lose more than just ships. They might lose their dominance. When the Vrike ships pulled away from Earth's orbit, people couldn't believe it. The invincible empire that had ruled galaxies was retreating from a single planet. Humanity had done the impossible. They had made the predators step back. The entire planet erupted in celebration. People hugged strangers, children waved flags, and scientists wept with relief. But even in that moment of joy, leaders reminded everyone, and this was not the end. The Vrike would return, and next time they would not underestimate humanity. In the days that followed, Earth changed even more. The sense of unity grew stronger. Every country shared its knowledge freely. The hybrid ships were improved, new defense platforms were built, and the study of alien technology expanded faster than ever before. People didn't talk about aliens anymore. They talked about the next challenge. Humanity had discovered something bigger than fear. They had discovered what they were capable of when they worked together. From orbit, the Earth looked small but powerful, a single glowing dot of determination in the dark universe. The Vrike Dominion had always believed that power came from domination, from controlling others. But humans were proving a different kind of truth, that real strength came from unity, empathy, and willpower. The galaxy was beginning to notice. Other hidden civilizations, once silent under the shadow of the Vrike, started to whisper among themselves. If the humans can stand against them, they said, maybe we can too. Without knowing it, humanity had become a symbol of hope, not just for themselves, but for every life form that had ever lived in fear of the Dominion. And so, as Earth rebuilt and prepared for whatever came next, one thing was certain. The moment the Vrike retreated was not just a victory, it was a turning point for the entire galaxy. For the first time in countless years, the predators who thought they ruled everything were forced to stop and look back. They had discovered something far more powerful than their weapons. They had discovered the human spirit. Months passed after the Vrike fleet left Earth's orbit. The skies above the planet were calm again, but deep inside, everyone knew it wasn't the end. The world had changed forever. Humanity was no longer the same species that once looked up at the stars with wonder. Now they looked up with purpose. Scientists, engineers, and builders worked day and night in underground labs and orbital stations. They had something the Vrike never expected, a determination that only grew stronger after every threat. From the ruins of the first battles, humans collected alien metal fragments, data cores, and ship remains. Every piece told a story. Every damaged panel, every circuit was studied. The humans learned fast, faster than any species the galaxy had ever seen. Within months, they had built ships that could match the Vrike in power. What once took the aliens centuries to perfect, humans could now copy and improve in weeks. It wasn't just technology. It was creativity, the kind that came from a history of survival. The news spread across space faster than light. Whispers reached faraway worlds, whispers that said the Vrike had finally met their match. At first, most didn't believe it. To many alien races, humans were still newcomers, soft, emotional creatures from a small planet of water and dust. But when they saw the recordings of human ships standing against the mighty Vrike fleet, the galaxy began to hope. Small species who had lived under the Vrike's rule for generations started to send secret messages to Earth. They shared information, weak points, stolen maps, old war data. For the first time, the predators who ruled the stars were being hunted, not with weapons but with unity. The humans didn't want revenge. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They simply wanted to make sure no one would ever suffer under the Vrak again. It wasn't about power. It was about survival. For everyone. So the humans formed a new alliance. It wasn't grand or complicated. It was made up of refugees, engineers, old soldiers, and free thinkers from many worlds. Together they built a new kind of fleet, one that didn't rely on domination but on cooperation. They called it the Free Systems Accord, and at the heart of it stood Earth, small, blue, and unbroken. When the Vrak learned of this new alliance, they laughed. To them it was impossible. How could a handful of scattered species challenge an empire that had ruled for centuries? They sent fleets to crush the rebellion before it began. But this time, the outcome was different. The Vrak's first fleet jumped into a sector near a mining world once ruled by them. They expected to find frightened miners and weak defenses. Instead, they found a wall of light. Dozens of human-designed ships, all armed with hybrid cannons that used Vrak energy cores. The humans had turned their enemies' weapons against them. The battle lasted hours. The Vrak fought with precision and numbers, but the Alliance fought with something stronger: heart. The humans guided the smaller ships, covering their allies, sharing strategies in real time. Every move they made confused the Vrak's computers. It wasn't about logic anymore. It was about instinct. When the smoke cleared, the Vrak flagship was gone. The unthinkable had happened. For the first time in their long history, they had lost a major battle. Across the galaxy, that victory echoed like thunder. On countless worlds, enslaved species began to rise up. They sabotaged Vrak factories, shut down communication hubs, and refused to follow orders. The empire that had once seemed unshakable was starting to crack, but the humans knew better than to celebrate too soon. They understood that victory wasn't about destroying ships. It was about breaking the idea of fear. So they didn't stop. They moved from system to system, freeing worlds one after another. In each world they liberated, they didn't demand loyalty. Instead, they gave people a choice: join them or stay free on their own. That simple gesture won more trust than any weapon could. Meanwhile, inside the Vrak council chambers, arguments grew fierce. The Empire's leaders were divided. Some demanded a total war to crush the humans once and for all. Others, more cautious, warned that the humans were different, that every attack only made them stronger. But pride is a dangerous thing. The Vrak had never learned to step back, and now it was too late. Their fleets were large but stretched thin. Their supply chains were breaking, and their soldiers, once fearless, now hesitated before every battle. The stories spreading through the ranks frightened even them. Stories of human ships appearing from nowhere, of alliances rising overnight, of once slave worlds turning into fortresses. One by one, the outer colonies of the Dominion began to fall. What took the Vrak thousands of years to build was crumbling in a matter of months. And behind every victory there were humans, guiding, teaching, helping others to stand. They didn't rule the Alliance with orders. They led by example. They showed others how to think freely, how to rebuild, how to believe in themselves again. In one battle, a small group of humans and allied pilots managed to outsmart an entire Vrak carrier group using nothing but decoys and clever timing. It wasn't brute strength, it was imagination. They led the Vrak ships into a massive nebula filled with magnetic storms, where their advanced sensors failed. By the time the Vrak realized what was happening, it was over. The galaxy began to understand something new, that humans didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they learned faster, because they could adapt, and because they never gave up. Even in their losses, they grew. Every mistake became a lesson. Every fall became a reason to rise higher. That was something the Vrak could never match. As the months turned into years, the once mighty Dominion began to lose control of its own core worlds. The arrogance that had once fueled their empire now turned into desperation. Their leaders started to hide. Their generals began to question everything they once believed. And all across the stars, the same message spread: the humans are coming. It wasn't a threat. It was hope. People who had lived in fear for generations started to rebuild. They painted their walls again, reopened schools, and planted crops on worlds that had known only war. Wherever the humans went, they didn't bring conquest. They brought life back. In the final stage of the war, the humans and their allies reached the heart of the Vraic Dominion, a massive cluster of fortified planets surrounded by defense rings and controlled wormholes. No one had ever breached it before. It was said to be impenetrable, but humans didn't see walls. They saw opportunities. They didn't attack head-on. Instead, they sent small teams into the communication networks, turning the Vraic's own systems against them. Within days, the Empire's fleets couldn't talk to each other. Their navigation failed. Their shields flickered. And then, when the time was right, the Alliance fleet appeared, silent, ready, and united. The final confrontation wasn't as grand as the Vraic had imagined. It wasn't a clash of endless firepower. It was quiet, steady, and precise. The humans moved like shadows, disabling one defense after another, cutting the Empire from within. When the last Vraic warship fell silent, the galaxy didn't cheer. It just exhaled, a long, quiet sigh of relief that spread from world to world. The age of fear was over. In the days that followed, humans didn't claim victory for themselves. They didn't call it the human empire or raise flags over conquered planets. Instead, they left symbols of unity, a small silver emblem, shaped like a circle, representing peace through cooperation. Many of the liberated species couldn't understand why humans didn't take control. They had earned it. But humanity never came to rule. They came to protect. They remembered their own past, how they once lived under fear and division, and they didn't want to repeat it on a galactic scale. So they helped rebuild what the Vraic destroyed. They shared knowledge, medicine, and technology freely, and in return, they received trust, something no empire had ever earned before. The Vraic themselves, broken and scattered, began to understand their own mistake. Some of them even came forward to speak with humans, not as conquerors but as equals. It was strange at first, but humanity accepted it. They knew peace could never grow from hatred, only from understanding. Over time, the galaxy changed. Trade routes reopened, new councils were formed, and alliances grew stronger. The old idea that power came from fear slowly faded away. And through it all, one truth remained. It all started because one small species refused to surrender. From that moment onward, the humans were no longer just a part of the galaxy. They were its heart. They had shown that courage didn't come from strength, and leadership didn't come from domination. It came from compassion, unity, and the refusal to give up when everything seemed lost. The fall of the Vraic Dominion wasn't just the end of an empire, it was the beginning of a new age. And somewhere on the blue planet where it all began, people still looked up at the stars every night, not with fear, but with pride, because they knew. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity had become the reason why. Years passed after the fall of the Vraic Dominion. The galaxy once ruled by fear was finally calm again. Planets that had been silent for generations began to speak. Trade routes reopened. The stars that once saw war now shone over peace. For the first time in living memory, no species lived under chains. But peace did not come overnight. The galaxy had been wounded deeply. Worlds were broken, people were lost, and trust was fragile. The humans understood this better than anyone. They had fought not for glory, but for survival, for a chance to build a better future. And now they carried the responsibility of protecting that peace. Across space, the Free Systems Accord continued to grow. It wasn't an empire and it wasn't a government. It was more like a promise between free worlds to stand together. Humans became the heart of it, not because they demanded it, but because others trusted them. They had proven that even in chaos they stood for life, not control. On Earth, things looked different now. The once busy cities had changed. Spaceports were everywhere. Sky highways carried people to orbital elevators that reached far above the clouds. The planet that once looked up to the stars now reached them daily. Humanity had become a spacefaring civilization, but deep down they were still the same, curious, hopeful, and restless. Everywhere, people worked to rebuild what the wars had destroyed. Scientists used alien technology to heal ecosystems that had been damaged by pollution and war. Oceans were cleaner, forests were green again, and the air carried new life. For the first time in centuries, Earth was not just surviving, It was thriving. Meanwhile, humans continued to explore. They visited the planets that had once been under Vrake control. Some of those worlds were still dark and quiet, their cities empty, their skies scarred. On those worlds, human engineers worked side by side with local species, fixing energy systems, rebuilding homes, and planting the first seeds of new life. In those moments, it didn't matter who was human or alien. They were all part of the same story now. Survivors who wanted to move forward. The Vrake themselves had changed. After their fall, many of them were lost, wandering through the galaxy with no purpose. Some wanted revenge, but most were simply tired. They had spent too long fighting, too long believing they were destined to rule. Now, without their empire, they had to face something new: humility. When the first Vrake ships arrived at Earth seeking peace, many humans were unsure how to feel. Memories of pain were still fresh. But humanity surprised everyone again. They didn't respond with anger or punishment. Instead, they offered help. They allowed the Vrake to rebuild their own colonies under guidance and protection. It was not forgiveness, and it was understanding. Humans knew that if peace was to last, it had to include even those who once caused pain. Over time, something remarkable happened. Some Vrake joined the Accord. They began to learn about cooperation, about trust, and about what it meant to build instead of destroy. They learned from humans what true strength looked like: the strength to forgive, to rebuild, and to start again. The galaxy began to call this new era the dawn of balance. There was no single ruler, no empire, no throne. Instead, there was a council, a circle of representatives from every free world. They met on a neutral station orbiting a calm blue star. That station was built by humans, but it belonged to everyone. It became a symbol of unity, a place where every voice mattered. At every meeting, there was always one empty chair, a reminder of the cost of arrogance, a memory of the past. No one ever sat in that chair, not even the humans. It stood there as a symbol of what the galaxy had learned. While politics and rebuilding continued, exploration returned to the forefront of human life. Fleets set out beyond the known regions, searching for new systems, new mysteries, and new life. It was in their nature not to conquer but to discover. On one mission, a group of humans found a planet that had never known intelligent life. Its skies were purple, its oceans golden under the light of twin suns. When they stood there for the first time, they didn't plant a flag. Instead, they built a small monument, a simple stone that read, "For all who come after us, may you choose peace over pride." That message spread throughout the stars. People across many worlds began carving it into walls, ships, and monuments. It became the symbol of the new age. Back on Earth, people began telling the story of what had happened. They didn't speak of heroes or victories. They spoke of unity, of the day humanity stood together against something far stronger and didn't give up. Children learned about the war not to glorify it, but to remember why peace mattered. In museums, old alien weapons were displayed next to human ones, not as trophies, but as reminders. The signs beneath them read, "These tools once took lives. Now they teach us to value them." Years went by and a new generation was born. Children who had never known fear, who had never seen war. To them, the Vrake were just part of history books. They grew up seeing different species walking together in cities, working together in schools and labs. The galaxy felt smaller, warmer, and more connected than ever before. But even in peace, humans didn't stop growing. They continued to build ships that could travel faster and farther. They learned how to use energy from stars safely. Some even dreamed of exploring other galaxies someday. The same curiosity that once took them to the moon now pushed them to the edge of reality. And yet, despite all their progress, humans never lost their heart. They still laughed, still argued, still created art, music, and stories. In every corner of the galaxy, wherever there were humans, there was life. Messy, unpredictable, and full of emotion. Many species admired them for that. The Vrake, once cold and distant, began to study human history and culture. They couldn't understand how such fragile beings had defeated them. But when they looked closer, they saw the truth. Humans didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they believed in something greater than themselves. The lesson spread far and wide. On one distant colony, a Vrake elder said to his people, "The humans taught us something our power never could. That kindness is not weakness. It is the hardest strength to master." As the decades passed, the humans became something unexpected. Not rulers, not conquerors, but guides. They were the ones who reminded everyone that peace must be worked for every single day. They were the ones who listened when others disagreed. And they were the ones who stood first when danger appeared again. But danger didn't always mean war. Sometimes it came in the form of misunderstanding or greed or fear. Whenever such moments arose, humans acted as mediators. They reminded everyone what they had all gone through, how easily pride could destroy and how powerful unity could be. The galaxy slowly began to live by those lessons. Disputes were settled through discussion, not destruction. Old enemies became allies. Planets traded not weapons but knowledge and art. The stars had never been brighter. One night a human explorer stood on the edge of a new world, looking up at a sky full of stars. Around them were people from many species and former enemies now laughing together. The explorer smiled and said softly, "If the old Vrek commanders could see this, they wouldn't believe it." And maybe that was the point, because what had once been unthinkable, a galaxy without war, without rulers, without fear, had become reality. And all because a small species from a blue planet refused to be afraid. In time, the phrase "only human" changed meaning. It no longer meant weakness or limitation. It became a phrase of respect. When someone stood against impossible odds, others would say with admiration, "That's only human." The story of Earth became the story of hope, told in every corner of the stars, passed from one generation to the next, and somewhere, far beyond the familiar systems where new stars were being born, the spirit of humanity continued to travel, not as conquerors, but as dreamers. They had faced darkness and turned it into light. They had taken fear and turned it into courage. And even when they could have ruled, they chose compassion. The galaxy would never forget that lesson, because when the predators thought they ruled the stars, they never imagined that the smallest, most unpredictable beings would be the ones to change everything. The humans didn't just survive. They redefined what power meant. And as long as there were stars in the sky, their story, the story of courage, unity, and the will to rise, would live forever.